day of unforgettable shame for the Yoshioka School. Never before had this prestigious center of martial arts suffered such total humiliation. Ardent disciples sat around in abject despair, long faces and white knuckles mirroring their distress and frustration. One large group was in a wood-floored anteroom, smaller groups in the side rooms. It was already twilight, when ordinarily they would have been headed home or out to drink. No one made a move to leave. The funereal silence was broken only by the occasional clatter of the front gate. Is that him? Is the young master back? No, not yet. This from a man who had spent half the afternoon leaning disconsolately against a column at the entranceway. Each time this happened, the men sank deeper into their morasses of gloom. Skipping along here, no one would have denied that the founder and first master Yoshioka Kempo was a far greater man than Sejuro or his younger brother. Kempo had started life as a mere tradesman, a dyer of cloth, but in the course of endlessly repeating the rhythms and movements of pace, resist, dying, he had conceived of a new way of handling the short sword. After learning the use of the halberd from one of the most skillful of warrior priests at Kurama, and then studying the Koyohashi style of swordsmanship, he had then created a style completely his own. His short sword technique had subsequently been adopted by the Ashikaga shoguns, who summoned him to be an official tutor. Kempo had been a great master, a man whose wisdom was equal to his skill. Although his sons Sejuro and Densensharo had received training as rigorous as their father, they had fallen heir to his considerable wealth and fame, and that, in the opinion of some, was the cause of their weakness. Sejuro was customarily addressed as the young master, but he had not really attained the level of skill that would attract a large following. Students came to the school because under Kempo the Yoshioka style of fighting had become so famous that just gaining entrance meant being recognized by society as a skilled warrior. Yeah, Musashi pays him a visit, and it is not good. It doesn't bode well for what happens to the students that are present at the temple. At this school, while Sejuro is out drinking and partying, his fellow men are dying essentially. So, but it's not their fault either. They're all embodied into this school of thinking, and one of the ways that they judge Musashi is by his appearance, which to me and to most people is pretty much wrong to do. You never judge people. So, skipping along here, I'm going to read a little bit about how they come to judge him real quick. There's a servant at the front door that answers the door and tells the teachers within the dojo of who is requesting entry into the school. So, a little before noon, one of the servants came to the dojo and reported that a man who called himself Musashi was at the door requesting admittance. Asked what sort of fellow he was, the servant replied that he was a Ronin, that he hailed from Miyamoto in Mimasaka, was 21 or 22 years old, about 6 feet tall, and seemed rather dull. His hair, uncombed for at least a year, was carelessly tied up behind a reddish mop, and his clothing was too filthy to tell whether it was black or brown, plain or figured. The servant, while admitting that he might be mistaken, thought he detected an odor about the man. He did have on his back one of the webbed leathered sacks people called warrior study bags, and this did probably mean he was a shogyosha, one of those samurais who's numerous these days, who wandered about devoting their walking hours to the study of swordsmanship. Nevertheless, the servant's overall impression was that Musashi was distinctly out of place at the Yoshioka School. Quick note here, at every temple they ask the potential student where and what they have learned and what style of martial arts they use. Here, a Ronin is typically frowned upon. They're not looked as real martial artists. A Ronin is not what you want to be. You want to be part of a school. So they're quizzing Musashi at the entry. Here we go. The servant, as amused as anyone else, left and came back to report that the visitor had as a boy learned the use of the truncheon from his father and had later on picked up what he could from warriors passing through the village. He left home when he was 17 and for reasons of his own, spent his 18th, 19th, and 20th years immersed in scholarly studies. All the previous years he had been alone in the mountains with the trees and the mountain spirits as his only teachers. Consequently, he couldn't lay claim to any particular style or teacher, but in the future he hoped to learn the teachings of Hachi Hojen, master the essence of the Kyohachi style, and emulate the great Yoshioka Kempo by creating a style of his own, which he had already decided to call Miyamoto style. Despite his many flaws, this was the goal towards which he proposed to work with all his heart and soul. It was an honest and unaffected answer. The servant conceded, but the man had a country accent and stammered at almost every word. The servant obligingly provided his listeners with an imitation, again throwing them into gales of laughter. The man must be out of his senses. To proclaim that his goal was to create a style of his own was sheer madness. By way of enlightening the lout, the student sent the servant out again, this time to ask whether the visitor had appointed anyone to take his corpse away after the bout. To this, Musashi replied, "If by any chance I should be killed, it makes no difference whether you discard my body on Torai Mountain or throw it into the Kamo River with the garbage. Either way, I promise not to hold it against you." His way of answering this time, said the servant, was very clear, with nothing of the clumsiness of his earlier replies. After a moment's hesitation, someone said, "Let him in." And that is why you don't judge people. You don't judge them at all. Yeah, so he does a number on them. And at this point, he's using his wooden sword. He doesn't have the metal swords that the Yoshiokas have, and he's still defeating them pretty badly. He's injuring them lethally. I think 3 of them don't survive, and a number of them are just really badly injured. But the reason why he's doing this is not because he wants to, it's because the Yoshiokas don't know when to quit. And they don't know because there is such a thing as honor within the houses, within Japan, within the whole world, right? And to read a little bit about that, here we go. To the samurai of this age, the most important thing in the world was honor. As a class, they virtually competed with each other to see who would be the first to die for it. The government had until recently been too busy with its wars to work out an adequate administrative system for a country at peace, and even Kyoto was governed only by a set of loose makeshift regulations. Still, the emphasis of the warrior class on personal honor was respected by farmers, townsmen alike, and it played a role in preserving peace. A general consensus regarding what constituted honorable behavior and what did not made it possible for the people to govern themselves with inadequate laws. The men of the Yoshioka School, though uncultured, were by no means shameless degenerates. When after the initial shock of defeat, they returned to their normal selves, the first thing they thought of was honor, the honor of their school, the honor of the master, their own personal honor. Putting aside individual animosities, a large group gathered around Sejuro to discuss what was to be done. Unfortunately, on this of all days, Sejuro felt bereft of the fighting spirit. At the moment when he should have been at his best, he was hungover, weak, and exhausted. Yeah, so that's the problem right there. They're completely blind to their arrogance, the pride that they have created themselves within the school, right? Sejuro and his high-ranking samurai constantly go out drinking, partying, womenizing, and doing all the stuff that they shouldn't be doing. He's weak, he's exhausted, which is exactly where the school's at. It's weak and it's exhausted. It's exhausted of funds, it's getting no money, and it's a weak style of fighting compared to what is out there, compared to all the samurai that emerged after the battles, the daimyos, the shoguns. But that's something I want to focus on, at least for now, is the honor of these guys and how you just don't judge somebody. You shouldn't judge somebody and their appearance, right? Musashi's doesn't have anywhere to live, has nobody, so he's taking on the mountains and the streams and the trees as teachers. He's learning spirituality, he's learning everything under the sun, and that should be considered something of high credence. But in a formal school setting like today's, like the universities, if you tell them that you're doing anything of that sort, it's frowned upon. You need to get that degree, and whether if it's a worthless degree, it's looked at as better than what a dirty plumber tradesman would be, right? Yeah, so students came to the school because that just gaining entrance meant being recognized by society. The founder and first master Yoshioka Kempo was a far greater man than Sejuro or his younger brother. Kempo had started life as a mere tradesman. Honor. Be well, folks.